Hi, my name is Jordan Liker, and this is my summary of the case study of the missing Booster Club funds. In this scenario, there's parents that are actively involved in a school and its activities. This is George Washington Middle School. And while many families in this community do not have the ability to provide financial support, they often provide support to the school by volunteering in the classroom and working athletic events. Much of the support is provided by the school's Booster Club. During a recent home basketball game, there was some suspicion of theft, or at least misuse of funds by a parent that was generated due to some money possibly missing from gate collections, as well as some missing tickets. In this case, what do we know? We know the school has many low SES families. There are some parents that are involved in the school. They're actively involved in the school. The principal is an established principal and has a reputation of working well with parents. There's an actively involved booster club. And one parent in particular, Mrs. Bowman, had recently asked for financial help from the PTA to allow her daughter to travel to New York due to her being considered an all-state cheerleader at a recent competition. However, after an explanation, when she met with the principal, he denied this because he viewed that the money would be better spent on all students rather than one student. Shortly after the denial, Mrs. Bowman volunteered to work at the last home basketball game of the season. At this game, there was a large crowd. Mr. Stevens was occupied during this time in areas that were away from the gate for the duration of the event. It does not state if Mrs. Bowman worked the gate, but she did give the money to Mr. Bowman at the end. They did use pre-numbered tickets and precise inventory counts for the concessions, and so those protocols were in place. Mr. Stevens, though, through conversation with a patron, learned that that patron paid to get in to the event with a $50 bill. At the end of the event, when Mrs. Bowman hands the gate bag to Mr. Stevens, he secured the school and then went to his car in the presence of a security guard and counted the gate proceeds before he made a night deposit. Mr. Stevens found a note in the bag from Mrs. Bowman stating that the tickets 78 through 88 were torn and they were discarded. However, the $50 bill, which is the cost of 10 tickets, was not in the bag. What we need to know to properly solve this case, did the PTA get asked to fund the student's trip, or did the principal deny this funding kind of unilaterally without the consent of the organization? Was the cheerleading competition affiliated with the school? And what are the guidelines for the school in providing uh, trips to for recognition if they were? This would be a similar situation if an individual on a wrestling team was the only individual that made it to a state tournament. It's not exactly the same if there's no competition happening in New York, if it's just for recognition, though. Where was Mrs. Bowman working? It never really states where she was working. It did just state that she gave the gate bag to Mr. Stevens. And who else was working at the gate? We know that two people were working at the gate. Who else was? Who? What were the two people that were working at the gate? What was the other money in the cash box? If there was happened to be $100 bill, that may explain what happened to the 50 if it was given out in change. Where does the profit go for the event? I know at my school, the Booster Club gets the profit and the proceeds from the concession stand. And so all money from the concession stand is actually handled by the Booster Club. So who actually gets the profit from this event? Who signed off on the ticket accounting sheet? What were the individuals that counted the money? How did they count that money themselves? Were they together, or did one person by themselves count that money? How many tickets were discarded? It stated that 10 tickets were discarded, but the numbers were 78 through 88, which is actually 11 tickets. Um, and then how were the tickets discarded themselves? Can we check to see if those tickets were actually discarded? Or is that impossible to do? We also need to know if the workers were running low on certain bills, low denomination bills. We mentioned that it was a large capacity crowd, and so did they have to exchange that 50 for some lower denomination bills to provide change for the patrons coming in? Does the school have video surveillance cameras that could be utilized in this situation to find out what happened to the money? How were the funds secured after being passed to Mr. Stevens? It mentioned that they were passed to Mr. Stevens, and then Mr. Stevens secured the school, and then he walked out to his car. So in the meantime, how were those funds there secured? Who was the patron that stated? Was the patron that stated that he paid with a $50 bill? Was he being honest in that situation? It's important to know too. And then, what are the established guidelines for the gate collection at this school? So there are several problems that arise here. The first one is that there may be some missing gate funds from the recent basketball event. Was this a case of fraud, or was this just honest operations, despite the need for possibly one of the workers, Mrs. Bowman, needing the money? Does the principal have too much influence in the school's parent organizations? He should be acting as an advisor, an advisory role only. Should not be making unilateral decisions. But is that taking place? There might be some possible improper reconciliation guidelines being utilized. If not, maybe the reconciliation guidelines need to be changed. There also might be some possible improper oversight to prevent the theft and the damage or the loss of tickets. Mentioned the principal was not able to make it back to the gate area or the concession area to kind of monitor that due to him being required to be in the supervisory role. But should that be changed, or should another worker be added to help to alleviate the large amount of work that Mr. Stevens has to do on a night like this? So the plan of action, the first step would be to speak with Mr. Dumas and the person that said he paid with the $50 bill and asked if he remembers who he gave the money to. That may be a great spot to start the investigation. And then assuming that Mrs. Bowman was one of the parents that were selling tickets, I would want to visit with the other parent and ask the following questions. I want to ask if they could explain what happened to the tickets, 78 through 88. Were these tickets used, or were they discarded and not sold? Um, how was the money counted before it was given to Mr. Stevens? Was it by one of them, by both of them? Could they explain what happened to the $50 bill the patron used as payment for his admission? If the other parent confirms the tickets were not sold, or they could explain what happened to the $50 bill, the money at the gate is correct. The question that they would need to solve, I guess, is what would happen to that 50, and maybe that parent could explain it, or maybe they couldn't. If the parent says that tickets 78 through 88 were sold, and the $50 bill was not swapped out for lesser bills or given out in exchange, then we need to speak to Mrs. Bowman as soon as possible and ask her the same questions. If both Mrs. Bowman and the other parents' answers were the same, that the tickets were not sold and they did not exchange the $50 bill, then I would want to get both of these ticket sellers together at the same time and just kind of go through the following: that I have a problem. You both indicated that the tickets 78 through 88 were discarded, but a patron informed me that they used a $50 bill to purchase a ticket to get into the game. Yet when counting the proceeds in front of a security guard, the $50 bill was not in the bag. Do you have any idea what happened to the $50? If one or both of the parents admit to taking the $50, we should ask that they return that. And then at that time, Mr. Stevens should also approach the Booster Club president and request that Mrs. Bowman, if she was the one that took that money, or possibly the other parent if they were involved, not to be assigned to work in areas that deal with money. They may still volunteer in other areas of the school, like the Reading Buddies program, but we just want to remove their access to the school funds. Since it was $50 that was potentially missing, this is not a large amount of money, and so it's probably not worth making it a legal issue to get the money back. However, the steps need to be taken to prevent these parents from handling money in the future at this school, and we need to inform the district of the situation to ensure that in the future, possibly in other schools in the district, that they are aware, and so they can take steps to help secure their funds, as well as these parents will most likely volunteer as their students move up in the school system. Some steps to be taken in this case: if the building is equipped with surveillance cameras, we should position those or add cameras to areas where money is handled if possible. We need to train or retrain workers on the school guidelines for ticket and concession sales, and require workers to fill out and sign sales reports, as well as count the money in the presence of each other. We need to institute a policy for discarding damaged tickets, And then following the event reconciliation guidelines, we need to follow the event reconciliation guidelines or change them so the reconciliation is not performed in personal vehicles or homes. A personal vehicle, as Mr. Stevens counted the money in his personal vehicle, is not a great place to count money. It's actually a possibility that the money, the $50 was there, but maybe slid somewhere like in between a seat in his car. We need to strictly adhere to the principal acting in an advisory role in the parent organizations. And we need to increase the staff presence to help oversee these events. This may require paying an additional person. In the case where we have these large events, large crowds, it may not be possible for one person to run the entire event alone. We may need some help from another supervisor or another supervisory position as well. And this could be a school staff member or possibly an athletic director. So in resolving the issue, it's important to speak carefully and tactfully, especially in discussing situations that are not proven. We want to keep an open dialogue. That's important no matter what the situation. Parent organizations can be a tremendous support to schools and students, and so principals need to work well with these organizations to ensure that the proper district guidelines are followed when these individuals are volunteering at schools. This may require some training sessions for these individuals so they can work school events. It's essential to secure funds from events to help ensure the needs of students and their activities can be met. So maybe some policy changes for all involved may be necessary. We need to continue to allow and encourage parental involvement in the school. We need to find alternative ways that parents can be involved if necessary. If a parent can't handle money, if they're not going to be allowed to handle money, what other volunteer opportunities can they have in that school? We don't want to alienate them from the school. Their children still attend that school. So what other volunteer opportunities would there be? We want to encourage parent organizations to have written guidelines on how the money that they generate should be spent. With strict written guidelines that organizations can follow, there are clear and easy answers for some situations. So what was I thinking here? I was thinking that there is not a simple answer to this dilemma. Many possible avenues need to be investigated to help improve procedures in the future. I was thinking, were there 10 or 11 tickets missing? 10 tickets would equal $50, but it seems less likely that someone would take $55, the cost of 11 tickets. In that case, if the $50 is accounted for, I was thinking a $5 discrepancy could have easily been a change or ticket error. They could have given an extra 5 out in change, or they could have given an extra ticket out by mistake. But what changes need to be initiated to better secure funds in the future? So we need to look at what changes could help secure these funds. And why are there no other school personnel present? In many situations, in many schools, school personnel help run events. In fact, they enjoy doing that. And so does it seem that no other school personnel is at these events? What I was feeling is that some parents and students of this community are in a tough situation. They're in a tough spot. Uh, they're trying to survive, and it can be a struggle. I was feeling that Mrs. Bowman just wants what's best for her daughter. She wants to be able to send her to New York. It'd be a great experience for her daughter. She wants what's best for her, and she's just struggling to provide that. Mr. Stevens has too much of a leadership role in the organizations, parent organizations. He should be acting as an advisory position only, and shouldn't be really making the decisions for the group. I was thinking that parent volunteers are given too much responsibility without any oversight. The parents can have some great uh, opportunities like the gate sales, but there should be some oversight and supervision of them during these times. Um, while the theft was relatively small at $50, this falls far below the amount that Mrs. Bowman indicated that is required to send Lucy to New York. She indicated it was around $800, just under $800 to send Lucy to New York. And so if Mrs. Bowman did take the $50, what was she going to do to find the rest of the money? I valued the dedication that the parents have to their children. It's hard to find time when you're a working parent to volunteer at the school, but yet these parents did. I value Mr. Stevens highlighting the student accomplishments. He announced that Lucy was an all-state cheerleader to the entire student body. I value that he's highlighting students' individual accomplishments both in and out of school. I also value the empathy that Mr. Stevens showed to Mrs. Bowman. Even though he did not support the use of the organization's funds in the manner that Mrs. Bowman desired, he still listened to her presentation that she had and explained the situation to her as nicely as he possibly could. I also value the positive relationships Mr. Stevens is trying to build with the parents and community members of the school. And then I value what that the principal is a visible presence at the school events. He actually found that the money was missing due to a casual conversation with a patron and just being present and visible at those events. Some of the unresolved issue is what actually happened to the money. We don't know what actually happened to that money. And actually, how many tickets were missing? Is it 10 or 11 tickets that were missing? There's a little bit of confusion in that. And then how are Mr. Stevens going to get help for the events that have too many duties for one person to do? Are they going to hire another staff member to help supervise the events? Do they need to hire an athletic director in this case? And then how are safeguards going to be improved? How are we going to improve safeguards to ensure that a situation like this does not happen in the future? Um, Furthermore, what type of role is the principal going to take in these parent organizations? Is it going to be an advisory role, strictly an advisor, or is he going to be part of the decision-making process? The principal really should be just an advisor to these organizations where they make the decisions. And then what steps will be taken to ensure the security of school funds without alienating parent groups? We don't want to alienate parent groups. They are a tremendous service to the school. We want to keep them involved. And so what steps we're going to take to protect the school and the school funds while still allowing for parent groups to be involved? Because we don't want to stop or diminish that dedication to the school. So, in promoting effective and efficient management of the school or district, we need to continue to encourage the work with parent organizations and help provide opportunities for students to help both groups succeed. So there are many opportunities that exist beyond the extracurricular activities, and even if we have a situation where a parent can't or will no longer be allowed to handle or work certain aspects of extracurricular activities, we got to find opportunities for them to volunteer elsewhere too. We don't want to alienate individuals from the school. Uh, we use, evaluate, and amend school guidelines to ensure the proper handling of school funds. In situations we need to that in situations that may arise at schools, we may have to evaluate the these guidelines that are used and amend them if necessary. So Mr. Stevens followed the guidelines to notice the potential discrepancy quickly. It's great that he noticed the potential discrepancy quickly. And so what ways can we improve these guidelines so this discrepancy doesn't happen in the first place? We want to encourage and sustain relationship with stakeholders. By taking time to listen and talk with Mrs. Bowman about her daughter's accomplishments, even though there's an agreement is not the agreement is not met, this does provide some goodwill towards each other. And so if issues arise in the future, they can better communicate with each other as well. And just being a visible presence at the school events and in the community. Mr. Stevens learned of the possible fraud by a casual conversation with stakeholders. And so just that casual conversation can help uh, identify those situations. The school leader promotes the social learning of every student. It is proven that with increased parental involvement, there's increased student achievement. So by encouraging parents to be involved and allowing many opportunities to be involved, encourages them to take an active role in the education of their children. So things like reading buddies, volunteering at school events, fundraisers, those are great ways to get parents involved. Building relationships within the community creates more interest in the school. So being a visible member of the community and talking with patrons at school events can actually generate interest in the community, within the community, and can actually get more volunteers at the school. Continue to celebrate student achievements both in and out of the school. By announcing personal achievements for all students, it can benefit their learning and it can benefit the climate of the school and improve that climate of the school. And then having honest communications builds trust. Trust allows the school to recover faster from setbacks in the community and promotes engagement between the community and the school. So how does the school leader promote student academic learning? Students whose parents are more involved attend school more regularly. Two-way communication between schools and parents raises class participation levels and increased enrollment in higher education institutions. So we don't want to alienate any parents because even though that a parent may have taken some money in this situation, their child is still a student at that school, and so we still need to be able to communicate with that parent effectively for the sake of that student. The recruiting and use of volunteers could make extracurricular events possible, which provide learning opportunities outside of the regular classroom. So by actively engaging parents in school events, we can build interest and actually generate more volunteers through this process. Opening up two-way communication makes stakeholders feel like they are a valued member of the educational team. Parents are very much a valued member of their students' education. And so by opening up a two-way communication where parents can uh, speak to the administration and feels comfortable speaking with the administration, um, we can create situations where the stakeholders will support the school and improvement projects more readily. And by not using accusatory language, we can promote effective communication. We want to support and promote the use of funds that benefit all students or the students that raise them. The funding of a trip for one student may not be the best use of those funds. We wanted those funds to be used on the student group that raised them, or the student body as a whole, and that could benefit the student body as a whole. And finally, references.